Hello and welcome to my kitchen here at Trails Inn 62. I wanted to know I appreciate you being here. For those of you who are coming back, welcome back. And for those of you who are visiting for the first time, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoy the video, and be sure and check out my other videos. I appreciate all those of you who have subscribed to my YouTube channel. And we're going to continue on with some videos here today. I'm going to be doing Italian meatball soup. So it's another soup recipe. It's still winter here, sort of. The weather's kind of the weather just a little bit springy, but that's okay. Italian meatball soup. The first thing we're going to do is to make our meatballs. We'll be using ground beef and ground pork. I'm going to mix these together. You can just use ground beef. You can just use ground pork, sausage, whatever you want to use to make your meatballs. I'm going to mix together some ground beef, some ground pork, season it up myself to make my meatballs. I'm going to be basically using a recipe that I do for meatloaf so that they'll hold together. Now, for those of you for the first time here, I want to remind you, or let you know, and for those of you who are coming back, I want to remind you, a lot of the things that I do are not necessarily USDA governmental university approved canning procedures. I do what I feel like is working. I look at recipes. I look at people that's done this for years and researched a lot of this. And if I do it, I'm comfortable with it. It's just for your information. This is how I do things. I'm not telling you should do it. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just telling you how I do it. Just so we know, we're clear up front. This rebel canning business it's my kitchen, my rules. I hope you enjoy it though, and enjoy the video. We're going to start off with making meatballs for our Italian meatball soup. Okay, now that we have the preliminaries out of the way, let's get started here. Make our meatballs. Now I'm starting with 2 pounds of meat, and I have a pound of hamburger, and I have a pound of ground pork. Now this is not sausage, this is just ground pork, so there is no seasoning in this whatsoever. You can use sausage, ground sausage, if you want to make these. That's okay, just remember it has seasoning in it, so you won't want to put all these seasonings that I'm about to put in here. Now I ground this pork myself. Had a pork butt roast in there that I just sliced the meat off of and ground it up and made my own ground pork. You can buy it ground, you can buy the sausage like I said. Now I'm going to put some spices and stuff in here, some other ingredients to make these meatballs. Okay, I'm going to put in 1 diced onion, medium onion, basically it's diced. A medium diced onion is about a quarter, or about a cup of diced onions. So that's about 1 medium onion. If you like a little more onion, you can put a little more onion in there. If you like a little less onion, you can put a little less onion in there. But I use 1 cup of diced onions, which is about 1 medium onion diced up. Now next I'm going to put something in that is a binder. I generally don't use products like this when I can, especially if I'm doing something raw, but I'm going to be pre-cooking these meatballs, par-cooking them, like I do my meatloaf patties. So I'm going to be using breadcrumbs in this one. You can use oatmeal, but I'm going to use some breadcrumbs. You don't use a lot. And normally you don't, this is not normal canning methods here. But we're going to put the binder in here. That's 1/3 cup of breadcrumbs or oatmeal. Mix that in real good here. That's going to help as a binder to hold your meatballs together so that when you process them, they don't come apart in your soup. And we'll also be putting, we're going to put 1 egg in here. Same thing with the egg. It's not necessarily an approved method for canning like this, except for in small amounts. I do use it in small amounts. And it helps with, again, with the binding process. Now, some recipes call for 2 eggs, but I'm just use 1. I use as few as I possibly need to. When I get this together and start putting it together as meatballs, if I need to add another egg, then I will. But 1 egg I think is going to be enough to get all this put together. Now next I'm going to be adding 2 tablespoons of Parmesan cheese, grated Parmesan cheese. And I don't use real Parmesan cheese. I use the kind you buy in the jar and put it on your pizza and stuff. So it's not fresh grated Parmesan, but it is grated Parmesan. And since I'm a cheapskate, that's what I use. I don't know that I've ever used real grated Parmesan cheese in my life. We'll mix that in here. And then next we're going to be putting in, the recipe actually calls for 1/4 of a bunch of freshly chopped parsley. How much that comes out to in dried parsley, I don't know, but I just added a tablespoon of dried parsley is what I'm putting in here, or 1/4 bunch of freshly chopped parsley. This works for me, so I'm just using the dried parsley. Mix this in, get it all good and mixed in there. Next I'm going to be adding 3 cloves of crushed garlic, but since I don't use fresh garlic either, I'm adding 1½ teaspoons of minced garlic, which is basically the same thing as 3 cloves of garlic. So 1½ teaspoons of minced garlic. And again, work that in really good and work it throughout your meatloaf. Oh, I'm sorry, your meatballs. A little different recipe than the meatloaf. But the concept is the same. We make these meatballs, we'll make them up, we're going to put them on a tray, and then we're going to pre-cook them before we make our soup. Now lastly, I've got some spices that I'm going to be putting in here. And that includes 1/2 teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 2 teaspoons of salt. And I've got all that just right in here. And just sprinkle this on here. And again, I'm going to mix it up with my hand mixer. Now to make my meatballs, I have a little meatball maker. I've got a bigger one, but this is a smaller one. So I simply dip it down in there. I get it full of the meat. Trim it off the sides. Since I don't have a lot of filler and stuff in these, or binder and stuff in these, then they come out a little rough. And so I just take them and I just roll them into balls here. They're roughly formed and I just roll them. So I've basically got uniform sized meatballs. And I'll get these done. Again, I just get a load of the meat on there and squeeze it. I've got a bigger one of these, and any of these meatballs that I have left over here, I'm just going to can some meatballs. Again, I don't have a lot of binders, so they don't bind perfectly, so I just take them and just roll them together so they'll bind together to form my meatballs. Basically the same size, roughly the same size meatballs that go in. You can see I've got these formed. I've got them on a drip tray so that the oil and the stuff and fat and water and stuff can drip out of it and not be on the meatballs themselves, but drip down into the bottom pan. And these I'm going to be putting in the oven at 375 degrees for about 30 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. I have to keep a check on them. I'm using the time and the temperature that I use for my meatballs to make my meatloaf patties. And I'm going to be using it for these, but since these aren't as big as my meatloaf patties, I may just go a little bit shorter time on them. Alright, welcome back. And while you were gone, although why you would want to leave the middle of this video, I don't know. But while you were gone, I finished cooking my meatballs. And as I said, 375. Now, I did these for 25 minutes. The purpose is to mostly cook them, par cook them. They don't have to be cooked all the way because they will cook some during the canning process. But I was just kind of going on my meatloaf recipe for canned meatloaf. And I do that for 30 minutes. These I did for 25. And this is what I came up with. They're nice and ready to go. Probably the best thing would have been to do them for 20 minutes. Maybe even 15, 17 to 20 minutes probably would have been best. They don't have to be all the way done because they will finish cooking in the canning process. The purpose is to par cook them just like I do hamburgers, so it's mostly cooked so it doesn't clump together in a hard clump and make it too dense to can. Which is why when I do hamburger, I par cook the hamburger. Some people do it raw. That's up to them. I don't. So anyway, these are ready to go. They'll be fine. They'll hold their shape when they do go through the canning process, so they'll be meatballs in my Italian meatball soup. The other thing I did while you were gone was I did some prep. Yeah, there were some things to prep. I didn't want to bore you with the mundane chopping and dicing and all that kind of stuff. So what I did, the recipe calls for 1 cup of diced onions, and that's basically 1 medium onion diced up. Okay? Then it calls for 4 carrots. Of course, you have to clean your carrots, split in half, and then thinly sliced. So, not wanting to have to go through the process of cleaning carrots and everything like that, I got baby carrots. Got a bag of baby carrots already cleaned, ready to go. I did cut those in half and then slice them up into thin slices. I did 16 baby carrots. Whether that's equivalent to 4 carrots or not, I don't know. Depends on how big your carrots are. But I did 16 of these to make 4 carrots. So that's the amount of carrots that I got. The other thing it calls for is 1 stalk of celery, again split down the middle and sliced into small slices. So I have 1 celery stalk sliced down the middle and sliced up into thin slices. Then it calls for a small bag, 5 to 6 ounce bag of baby spinach roughly chopped. So I have got a bag of baby spinach and I roughly chopped it. I don't know what their definition of roughly chopped is compared to my definition, but to me that's roughly chopped. It's roughly chopped. You could do it a little finer, I'm sure. I don't know. But anyway, if it was a small bag of baby spinach, I measured it. It was a little over 5 ounces. So said 5 to 6 ounces. Now it also calls for 2 cans of small white beans, basically navy beans. Now I don't use pre-canned beans because I can my own. I was going to use some of my own can, but I got to thinking, if they've already been canned once, even if they're store-bought canned beans, and you process them in the canner, they're liable to get way mushy. So what I did was I took some regular dried beans and I put them in my electric pressure cooker, and I ran it for about 18 minutes on my vegetable setting. So they're not completely done. They're al dente, but they're not too bad. Yeah, I can split it apart, but they're al dente, but they've absorbed probably as much water, yeah, a little al dente, that they're going to absorb, which is basically what I want. I don't want them absorbing too much of the liquid. They will cook fine if they were put in there raw, but the recipe calls for already cooked or partially cooked beans. So I did these in my pressure cooker, 18 minutes on vegetables, so they're al dente. They'll finish cooking in the process. They may absorb a little bit of the liquid, but that's okay. You can always add liquid to the soup when you heat it up to eat. You can add the broth, chicken broth, beef broth, whatever kind of broth, vegetable broth, depending on the kind of soup you have. When you're getting ready to eat it, you can always add a little more of that. So if it absorbs a little bit of the liquid, that's fine. According to the recipe, if you just want to use this dry beans, a half a pound of dry beans soaked overnight and then boiled for 30 minutes. That's what the recipe calls for. So you can do it either way. I did mine this way. You can do it that way. You can use canned beans if they're already canned, your own canned beans, or store-bought canned beans, white beans, 2 14-ounce cans. You can do it that way. That's fine. We'll also need some chicken stock and some water. Now, like I said, we've got the meatballs done. I've got my beans ready to go. Our next step is we're going to take our onions, we're going to take our carrots, we're going to take our celery, we're going to take our garlic, we're going to take our vegetables, and we're going to saute our vegetables. 1 cup of diced onions, or 1 medium onion diced up. And next we're going to put in our 4 carrots, or 16 baby carrots. Our 1 stalk of celery. Again, these are all sliced up as I indicated before. And 4 cloves of garlic chopped, or I always use minced garlic, and that's 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. And that's equivalent to 4 garlic cloves chopped up. I'm going to mix these up and I'm going to saute this probably about 4 minutes. Alright, into our pan we're going to add 5 1/4 cups of chicken broth, chicken stock. If you don't have that, bouillon cubes, 5 1/4 cups. You can also use vegetable. I'm using chicken because that's what I have. But you can also use vegetable stock, broth, and then 2 1/2 cups of water. We're going to put in 3/4 teaspoon of salt. Then we're going to add some pepper. I don't know, maybe a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. I like pepper. You may not want that much pepper, just kind of your taste, just whatever you want the pepper to be. And then we're just going to bring this to a boil. And once it gets to a boil, then we're going to turn off the heat and we'll be ready to prep our canning. My meatballs have been in the refrigerator because I made them yesterday actually. Didn't get this finished, and that's why you were gone. Oh wait, I was gone. Anyway, so after this gets to a boil, I'm going to drop my meatballs down in that after I turn off the heat to kind of warm them up before I put them in my jars. But I'm going to be getting my jars ready, get my canners ready, and get everything ready to go. Okay, ready to fill our jars. Now the recipe calls for 6 pints. I'm going to do mine in 1.5 because that's more like enough for 2 people. Pint may be a little bit too much for 1 person, but it's not quite enough for 2 people unless you just don't eat much. But I'm going to do mine in 1.5. So 6 pints, that'll be 4 1.5. Now the first thing I'm going to do is add my beans. I'm going to start off with a 1/2 cup in each one. Basically what I'm doing is I'm evenly distributing my beans. So it's a little over a 1/2 cup each. Next we're going to put our spinach in, and it says simply a small handful of spinach per jar, so we're just going to put a chunk of spinach in there. Again, it's all about evenly distributing throughout all the jars. So I'm starting with 1 claw of spinach and then going from there. And next we're going to put in our meatballs. It calls for 3 meatballs per pint. So it's 1.5. It's for 2 people, so I'm going to do 4 meatballs per jar. I've got 4 per jar. Now I'm going to put my vegetables in, and basically I'm just going to divide up the vegetables between the 4 jars. So I'm going to start with 1/3 of a cup because it looks like that will be a good amount. Again, this is not precise. I'm just dividing it up between the jars. So 1/3 of a cup was a good amount. I've got just a little bit left over here. Now we're going to add the liquid, leaving 1 inch of head space. We'll fill it up, and then we're going to debubble. We'll get all the air bubbles out. Now you may not use all your liquid, that's okay. It's better to have a little bit left over than not enough to fill your jars. So I've got that air bubbled out, then I'm going to put in a little to fill it up to 1 inch. Alright, next we're going to wipe our rims, put on our lids, finger tight, and then into our pressure canner. We put our bands on. finger tight into the pressure canner. Remember, you don't want these too tight. On the other hand, you don't want them too loose. So just kind of finger tight. Alright, we've got them in our canner. 4 pint and a halves of Italian meatball soup. We make sure that we're on vent, high, and we're going to do it for 90 minutes because there is meat and beans. Meat and beans, pint and a half or quart, you do for 90 minutes. And so we're ready to go. There we are. And they're done. My Italian meatball soup turned out pretty good. You can see the layers in there, and we'll try it out. I think it's going to be good. And that's it. Italian meatball soup. I hope you enjoy it. From my house to your house. From my kitchen, your kitchen. Till next time. God bless.